All right, today we're jumping into something big. We're looking at an article by Dalmar Singh Soud that basically lays out a plan to reboot an entire nation. He argues that Nepal is in a deep, deep crisis of governance. And he's not just pointing fingers, he's offering a radical roadmap for how to fix it. And when I say radical, I mean it. This plan questions everything, from political parties all the way to the Constitution itself.
So the author, Demar Singh Saud, doesn't waste any time. He kicks things off with this incredibly powerful statement. He's saying these aren't just buzzwords or abstract issues. No, he argues they have a real, tangible cost, a cost that you can measure in people's lives, in economic damage, and in this massive loss of trust in the system.
So you have to ask, where does all this frustration and disillusionment go? Well, the author says this crisis, which has been simmering for years, has finally boiled over. It's ignited this huge firestorm of public anger, and it's pushed the whole country into what he calls a new situation.
And right at the very center of this new situation is something the author calls the Gen Z movement. He sees it as a direct and powerful pushback against decades of corruption. It's a reaction from a younger generation that feels like the system has completely failed them. In his view, this isn't just another protest. It's the start of a whole new political reality. So what's really driving this crisis? What's the engine behind it all? The author argues it's not just a few bad apples or random acts of corruption, it's something much deeper, a deeply embedded system of political protection that actually lets corruption thrive. At the absolute heart of this whole argument is one key term, bhagbanda. This is the patronage system. Basically, it means who you know and, more importantly, which political party you're loyal to matters way more than what you actually know. The author claims this is the poison in the well, contaminating everything.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. This is the central conflict of the whole piece. On one side, you have the Bhagbanta system, which the author says just leads to decay and incompetence. And on the other, you have his proposed merit system, built on things like open competition and actual skill, which he believes is the only way to restore public trust. And the fallout from this patronage system, well, the author describes it as this devastating, vicious cycle. See, when the corrupt are protected, the very institutions that are supposed to serve the public get hollowed out. And because of that, talented young people who don't have the right connections get shut out. And eventually, people just lose all faith in the system itself.
But here's the thing. This article doesn't just diagnose the problem and leave it there. It actually proposes a cure. The author lays out this really comprehensive 5-point plan for what he calls national reconstruction. So the proposed solution is framed as these 5 pillars. You can think of it as a multi-front attack on the status quo, one designed to completely dismantle the old, broken system and build something new and better in its place. The first pillar is accountability. And let me tell you, this proposal is radical. It calls for a massive investigation into the wealth of every single public official, going all the way back to 1990. Any assets they can't explain? Nationalized. The message here is crystal clear. The era of getting away with it would be over. Next up is transparency. And the author's idea here is basically to throw open all the books on government spending. I mean, just imagine a world where every single government contract, every bid, and all the progress on major projects is tracked online, in real time for any citizen to see. That's the vision. Now, the author makes a really important point here. He says these administrative fixes, they're not enough on their own. The problem actually runs much, much deeper. It's embedded in the political culture and even in the Constitution itself. And this leads to a call for a major cultural shift. The author points to a culture he calls andhabhakti, which basically means blind devotion, to political leaders. He argues that this is what allows corruption to fester, because it kills critical thinking. He wants to replace it with a culture of accountability. This critique of the culture then leads to an absolutely drastic question. The author doesn't just suggest reforming the system anymore. He starts to ask if the major political parties themselves are just beyond repair. And he gives a direct, unfiltered answer. He argues that the government's #1 duty should be to outright ban these parties and prosecute their leaders for their alleged roles in corruption. It's a pretty stark statement that really shows the depth of frustration that's driving this call for change. And the proposed changes just keep getting bigger. The author suggests putting some really fundamental questions directly to the people through a referendum or a commission. We're talking about huge questions, like whether to have a directly elected executive, the entire structure of the state, and even its religious identity. But ultimately, the author argues that this huge, monumental task can't just be left to the government to figure out. The final part of his plan brings the responsibility right back to the people themselves. And this right here is the final piece of the puzzle. The author is adamant that no reform, no matter how good it is on paper, can actually last without a vigilant public. For change to stick, you need constant pressure and monitoring from citizens, from the media, and from civil society to hold power accountable. And so, the article leaves the entire nation with this one fundamental choice. Do you stick with the convenience of short-term political gains, or do you take on the difficult, painful, but necessary path of deep structural reform? It's a choice, the author argues, that will define the country for generations to come.